Today is September the 17th, 2013, and we're interviewing Nicole Roy for the Roots to Boots project. Thank you for being with us, Nicole.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Pleasure, Carol.
Well, I'd love to know, first of all, about your family history. Can you tell me a little bit about what you know about your grandparents and where they may have come from in Europe?
Yes, sure. My father was born in Krakow. His mother was one of 18 children. And they were very prominent in the shtetl of Krakow, which I was very fortunate enough to go and visit with my husband a number of years ago. And unfortunately, all of them, 97 of his family was taken to Auschwitz, and they all perished except one of the family. So there were 97 that perished of his family. My mother was born in a little place called Cottbus, which was an hour outside Berlin, and she was from a prominent Jewish family, but I think they were more German than Jews. You know how the families grew up in Germany. And she lost her parents at a very young age, and her twin sister and her brother and her immigrated as Hitler came to power, and they saw things were really deteriorating for them, and they were very blonde and blue-eyed and very Aryan looking, just what Hitler wanted. Mm-hmm. Went to Belgium, and my father had been at school. His mother was a very, for that time and age, she sent her son and her sister's child that was brought up by her because she died at childbirth. So the two boys were brought up like twins. They were put on a train in Krakow, and they went for 2 days on a train to Belgium, and they went to a French school, which was very unusual for the shtetl life in Krakow in those days. Mm-hmm. And so he actually, most of his life lived in Belgium, went home holidays to Krakow, and remained in Belgium and tried to get his parents out of Krakow, but unfortunately they thought nothing would ever happen to them in the town. So my dad was able to survive, met my mother in Belgium. They couldn't actually communicate in the beginning, but somehow got married. He actually spoke 7 languages, and my mother spoke German, and then, of course, spoke French. And she opened a beauty salon with her sister, her twin sister. And my father was in the diamond industry under his uncle, who was the founder of the diamond industry, actually, which became one of the biggest in the world. Today it's India, but he was one of the founders of the diamond industry in Belgium. And his last name was Zweig, Z-W-E-I-G, and his uncle was Himmelblau, but he changed it to Hill. Uh-huh. And he was decorated by the Queen of England, this queen, and because he ran the diamond industry in London underground for the whole of the Second World War.
So at what point did your parents...
My parents' story is an incredible one. My father got a tip off that my mother was going to be picked up because they thought she was Christian and living, married to a Jewish man, and that she was going to actually be picked up the next day from, and put into a camp. Mm-hmm. And so they happened to know they got some guide, and they drove as far as they could, and they actually crossed the Pyrenees by foot and got to Spain, and then eventually to Marseille. I mean, I'm cutting the story very short.
No, but give me as much detail as you can.
And
it's fascinating.
I had my sister, who was only 3 at the time, was baptized to save her life in case they were picked up, so that she could, in a convent, in a small little convent that they had found in France. And eventually they got a passage on a ship in Marseille, and this boat was going to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. and my father arrived with $10 in his pocket and heard his name called on the pier, and he couldn't understand who would know that he was on the ship. But one of his friends from Belgium heard that he, his story, how they I don't know how they got to know, and helped him find an apartment and gave him the financial backing to start a business. And he was there for 9 years, but unfortunately, I was born in Brazil, in Rio. Found the country very, very corrupt, and then went to South Africa. And I was also just before my 4th birthday.
And
So we went to Cape Town.
You went to Cape Town?
Yeah, we went to Cape Town.
You were 4 years old when you went to Cape Town?
Yes. And I spoke Portuguese, only Portuguese.
Wow. So that must have been quite a transition for you.
It was, and I actually can remember my first day at school, my parents dropping me off at this little school in Cape Town, and it was in a church building, and they left me, and I couldn't speak to anybody. Nobody understood me, and I was always quite a chatterbox, and couldn't understand why nobody could understand me, speaking Portuguese. But children adapt, and I learned English that way, because at home my parents actually spoke German. My mother really never mastered Portuguese very well in Brazil. She knew enough to go to the store, and but she mostly spoke German and French, but they spoke German at home.
Did they eventually learn English as well?
Oh yes, they learned English. Yeah. Oh yes, my dad spoke English, and he opened. He had the biggest diamond polishing factory in Cape Town.
So tell us about your childhood in Cape Town. What was that like?
It was. All I can say is growing up in Cape Town in the time that we grew up. I was born in 44, so I was there, 50s. Even my husband and I are both the same age. It was the most awesome time to live in Cape Town. I don't say that the politics were great. I mean, as a young child, I couldn't understand. And, especially after apartheid, I became politically active, where I was blacklisted for 15 years. But because I had grown up in a home where anything, I mean, if it was a teaspoon that was made in Germany, my father would throw it out. I mean, there was just like so much hatred, and they never spoke of their history. I kind of picked up things, and eventually he wrote it down, but a very, very minor part of his history. In fact, there are many pockets that I have no clue of what happened. He did not want to speak about his family, the 97 of his family that was killed. He did know through somebody who was in Auschwitz, a first cousin, that his mom and his brother and a few of the aunties had been killed on Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur was a very emotional day for him. He was they never spoke about anything. My father never ever spoke about his family, and if you did, it was always brushed off. And it's very sad, because I used to say, especially when my kids were born in Cape Town, I would say, please, just do it quietly in a room, just tape it and give this history so that the kids could have the history, because this is going to die one day. And he would say, I'll do it, but he never did.
What were your fondest memories of living in South Africa, either in childhood or as a teenager?
My fondest memories is the freedom that we had, and the outdoor living, and the beaches, and the people. They were wonderful people. And the community was a really rich Jewish community. And the values, I think, that we picked up were phenomenal, because they still carry on here in Dallas, the values that I was brought up with.
Can you give me an example of one of those?
Well, I mean, holidays were very traditional. I really wanted to learn about it, even though my parents were not, they never pushed me. I took 2 buses and a train to get to Hebrew school on a Saturday. It was just like I wanted to learn about my parents even didn't want to light candles on a Friday. But my sister didn't ever care about it, but I was always, I don't know what it was in me. I really, really wanted the Jewishness.
Were there Jewish youth groups to belong
Oh
to?
yes, I belonged to the temple, to our shul group.
Mhm.
That was mostly what we did. We didn't have groups like the BBYO and things like that. There was Habonim and things. I didn't really go to that. I was actually a member of I was very active in the shul, the youth group in the shul.
You mentioned being blacklisted. What did you do to
Well,
become
I went to
blacklisted?
college, and to me it was horrendous that, because you were born with black skin, you couldn't go to college or you couldn't go to school,
Mhm.
and that you had separate entrances, very much like the South was here. But it was really terrible. And it was the years when Mandela was, put into prison, and there was a lot of Jewish kids that were very active against the government. And I attended a tremendous amount of meetings, and actually went to Johannesburg on a train where we were going to protest, and heard that they were going to arrest a lot of the youth, and phoned my father and said, I do not want to do anything that will upset your business, so would you give me an air ticket and I'll come home, and I will not walk the protest. And was very, very lucky that I didn't, because they picked up a lot of kids and gave them 24 hours to leave the country. So I had my mail opened, my parents' phones were tapped for many years, even into my married life. Things were, and I think I was watched till I virtually left South Africa. But it was something that I had to do. I mean, I still do not believe. I mean, having been my father losing 97 of his family, and then having a whole nation persecuted like this, just for the color of their skin, was just, to me, it was just horrendous. I mean, to me, it's just like.
How did you meet your husband?
We were actually in Hebrew school together,
Mhm.
and we were in Hebrew classes together. But I knew the family. My sister, they were a very, very well-known family in Cape Town. His uncle started a temple there, a shul. And after school, I went my own way. I went and I did social work, and then actually spent a year in Antwerp, where I did travel. An aunt of mine was in a travel agent.
Mhm.
Well, she was really not a real aunt, but we called them aunt. And I stayed there for over a year in Antwerp. It was a wonderful part of my life. And when I came back, I met Michael. He came in to book a trip. I ran a travel agent in Cape Town.
Mhm.
And everybody said, you've got to go out with him. He's got a fabulous car. I said, come on, get real. At any rate, he did ask me out, and we went out, and we had a very, very fast courtship. I mean, I was 25 when I got married, which was old in those days. And we started going out in May, June. We got engaged in August and got married in November. So we've been married nearly 44 years.
So what was the impetus for your family to leave South Africa? And did you come directly to Dallas?
Yeah, well, Michael and I I was very influenced by my parents' history and did not want my children to go to the army there. I have 2 boys and a daughter. And at those times they said, as soon as they were 14 or something, they had to enlist to the army so that after school, and we didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, things are not great there, but certainly they weren't called up for the army. And Michael and I, early in our marriage, decided that if we could, we would leave. And we gradually did apply, and it took us 5 years to get a visa, which was absolutely nuts. And once we had been to the States, but I had never been to Dallas. And we were first originally going to go to Stamford, Connecticut, because we had very, very good friends of Michael's family living there. And Michael had gone from his family business to the diamond industry, which my father had been teaching him for a number of years, so that we could immigrate, because he couldn't leave, with what he had been pulled into the family business at a very young age. So he did not, finish college. And I applied to get a visa just to come, and I had 3 babies, and they wouldn't even let me come to see Dallas. When we had made a decision to come to the South, rather, it was the oil crisis, and we decided, we knew 2 families well, but not that well. I mean, we had no family here, and we decided the biggest wrench was leaving South Africa. I mean, leaving your whole family. His family, he's got 29 first cousins. I mean, his father was one of 10, also from Poland originally, and his mom was one of 4. So there was tons of cousins and a tremendous support system, and they would not give me a visa. They just would not give me a visa to even come and visit here. So we landed here and had never been to Dallas. We thought, well, the worst thing could happen. We won't like it, and we'll just move on, because it'll be our unit, our family, which is all we had, and we'll just move on. And here we are, 33 years later.
So what was your first impression when you got here?
Well, we got off the plane, and the kids were in awe. First of all, there was snow on the ground. We never got snow. So it was February the 8th, 1980. And and then there was 24 hours of TV, which in their eyes was just, we had an hour, 1 hour from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8. So to them, and channels, I mean, every other, you could get. So their impression was TV and snow on the ground. Children, I mean, they were 4, 7, and 9. So, and here we are, 33 years later.
You mentioned you came in 1980 with snow, but that happened to have also been the year of the massive heat wave. How did you deal with that summer?
Oh, boy. I mean, we just bought our house, which we're still on Warm Mist. And, I mean, it got to like 100 and something in no time, and I thought...
For 100 days.
I mean, yeah, unbelievable. And I said to Michael, I don't need to put a pool in. I mean, in those days it didn't even add to that much. So we decided to put a pool in, and we were sending tapes, and I was very, very close to my mother-in-law. And I said, we're putting a pool in the yard, which nobody called it a yard in South Africa. It was a garden. And she said, where are you going? And the tape came back, and she said, where are you going to hang up your washing? Because in Cape Town we didn't have dryers. So she said, where are you going to hang up the washing? I said, well, not in this yard. We don't have yards like in Cape Town. It was very fun. We actually had so much to do and adjust to that we actually coped very well in that heat.
How did you find the folks that were already here from South Africa, was it easy to immigrate into the community?
You know, there were only about 8 families when we arrived, and then it started exploding, like within 1980, at the end of the year, middle of the year and the end of the year, there were lots of people coming in. But when we came, there was just around 8-9 families, and they were wonderful. They were very, very, they took us under their wing, they took us to shul, they brought us, our container hadn't come, they brought us blankets, and because we just had to hire beds and everything, because we bought our house and we had no furniture. The kids thought it was wonderful. They could just run around amok with no furniture in it. And we just had the basics. We had beds, and we brought our dog from South Africa, and that was the best thing that we ever did, because they had something from home.
Who were some of those original families?
There was the Lurie's, Saul Ruth Lurie, and there was the Strelitzes.
Mm-hmm.
There was the Cohens, Dale and Lawrence Cohen.
Mm-hmm.
We became very, very friendly with Merle. Became like a sister. Unfortunately, passed away. Merle and Brian Ellman,
Mm-hmm. Yes, I
and
remember.
myself, and who else was there?
Were Rose and Benzie coming?
Oh no, they came
They
quite.
came later?
Rose and Benzie live. We celebrate holidays together. So she's just a road away from me, a street
Mhm.
away from me. In fact, she was broke fast at my house. We're very, very friendly. They're a wonderful family.
Mhm.
No, they came a number of years after us.
Uh-huh. And what about the general Jewish community? How open were
We
they?
were very, very fortunate. My mom's twin sister had her best friend was Steinhardt. And I don't know if you know Ron and Phyllis Steinhardt here in
Mhm.
Dallas.
Mhm.
And she said, you know, she's got a son and daughter, and he is the president of the bank, and I'll give you their number, and you'll be. So we were able, when we got here, Ron and Phyllis were just unbelievable. I mean, they became our family. They gave Michael an office in his building at Valley View, and we had our money transferred into his bank. You know, it was just incredible. They gave us a party, a barbecue, and they introduced us to a lot of the American. We've always been friendly with a lot of Americans. We felt that we had to integrate. A lot of the South Africans don't integrate. I mean, they still keep very much on there, you know, between themselves. And we felt that this was not beneficial to the kids or to us, that we needed to. But Phyllis and Ron, without them, I could say it would have been very, very difficult.
How did the children integrate easily
Oh.
into the community?
My eldest, Gavin, he came back with an American accent within 2 weeks. He was calling it grass. I was saying, he picked up an American accent. He talks like, all the kids talk, not like us, but they integrated amazingly well. Just the first summer was a little difficult because we got here in February, school kind of ended, we just got the house and everything. We put them into the JCC to camp, and they were bused, poor things, with no air conditioning, and it was 100, and they came back with all these chigabytes.
Yes, those were the days.
Oh, wow. And Sol said, you know what, Sol Lurie was our doctor, he said, I really think you have to pull the kids out because they're not acclimatized to look at these kids, they're spitting to, you know. So they really didn't, but once they started school again, you know, school started after the summer, there was no coming back. They just integrated into sport, and everything just fell into place. The kids adjusted amazingly well.
Did you have a career at that point?
Yeah, I worked at Hillcrest Travel for about 5 years, and was very lucky because I could choose my hours. It was right 2 minutes from my house, so I could go and work in the morning, pick up the kids, take them to wherever. I was always in the car, and because my eldest Gavin was at St. Mark's, Justin was at Prestonwood, and Monique was at the JCC. So I was just in the car, like all the mothers today. But I could choose. I could go after work. I had a key, so I could do. And travel was very different. It wasn't on the computer. You had to write out your tickets. Everything was so different. But it wasn't like Cape Town. I mean, travel was, and then it suddenly became computerized and everything, and then I stopped working.
When you came into the room, I admired a piece of your jewelry, and you said you were a designer. Is that something that you did professionally, or?
No. I just do my own thing. I have done a few little drawings, but very few. But I do paint in my spare time.
Tell us about your painting and what type of painting you do.
About 24 years ago, I really wanted to go to art school. And my parents said it wasn't for a Jewish girl to go to art school because it was a hippie place in Cape Town. And my parents were pretty conservative, my father especially. My mom was a very German, very, I don't want to say abrasive, but she was quite a hard lady. I think a lot of it now that I'm older and everything, her life was not she had a wonderful life after, in South Africa and a lot of the years in Rio, but her earlier years were not easy. So she was not an easy lady, and my dad was the softer one of the two, but they wouldn't let me go to art school. And I said to Michael one day, I'm going to go to art school. There's one right up the road. And I went and I started dabbling and just painting what I wanted to do at Jay's art studio.
My grandson goes there.
And then I followed Dawn to the Artist Within. And I do very diverse things. I actually do a lot of like African stuff that it just comes out, and I just find it very relaxing. And the girls that I paint, we can get help, but if we want to just do whatever we want to do, we just pay for virtually the time spent in the art studio.
Have you had your art exhibited?
No, they keep on saying I must. I'm a little. I don't think it's that good. My husband thinks it differently, but I don't. And friends, but I'm a little bit shy about that. I've sold a few pieces, but I have not had an art exhibition. I'm not like Veronique Jonas. She's really great. She paints well.
I'd like to ask you a question about the laws, other than the apartheid laws, which of course we knew were very different. Were there any other laws that you found different between South Africa and the United States, either with regard to gender or anything else?
The culture's different, but not really.
No,
not really. If there hadn't, and I think most of us will, maybe because I was politically involved, I think if there hadn't been a black problem, there would have been a Jewish problem. Because in Cape Town there were a lot of Malaysian people, which was Arab, and they definitely focused on the black population, and we had mostly the mulatto, the colored people in Cape Town. But if they hadn't, I'm sure there were numerous things that happened in the last few years of us living there that were not so there were some incidents against the Jewish people. And I'm sure that there is, I don't know today, I'm so out of what happens in South Africa. I know from my friends that I'm still very, very, very friendly with, that things are not great. But I've never really asked about the Jewish problem.
Were there any real major adjustments that you had to make when you came here, or was it relatively easy?
I wouldn't say it was easy. First of all, my husband's had to start a business. I did miss the beauty. I mean, Cape Town was just stunning. And the beauty was just, that was something that I really, really missed. The people, you did miss your friends from school, from growing up, and your support system that you had of your family and that were always there and dropping in. That was something that, that was something that we had. On a Sunday, your house, nobody phoned. They just dropped in. If you were there, you were there. So on a Sunday, our house was like very open house. I could have like 14, 15 people sitting at the pool. People were very casual. They'd say, we're coming for coffee now. Can we come? Yeah, sure. We'd love to have you. It was very, very more open. Here it was more formal. So in that way, we had to adjust to that. And I think the support system of Michael's family was a tremendous family. Of his sister was very close to, and his mom and my parents.
Do you go back often?
No. The last time, I think, is 7, 8 years ago. I find it very hard to go back. It's not the same place anymore. I don't have any family, sorry to interrupt. I don't have anybody there. I didn't have any first cousins, and I had no grandparents on either side. So for me, it's not a draw to go back anymore. For Michael it is. He's got a sister there, and his family still live there.
When you have to pick up and leave, obviously it's difficult. There's things that you can bring with you and things that you must leave behind. What was the most important thing for you to bring with you besides your physical family, and what was the most difficult thing to leave behind?
The most difficult thing to leave behind, without a doubt, was family and friends. Without a doubt, not any material things.
Was there any particular material thing that was most important to bring?
Yes, but I've got it today.
Yes.
My father took 25 years. He all his life wanted to give a Torah in memory of his family. And having been so steeped into our shul, and this Torah was brought, my uncle that ran the diamond industry in London, who had moved to London Hill, Himmelblau, had got a Torah from Israel. And my father he picked it up from Israel, my uncle. And my father went from Cape Town to London, picked up the Torah, and held it all the way to South Africa. And then when we came here and it got nearer, Gavin was already 9 and Justin was 7. My biggest wish was for them to read out of this Torah. And my parents wanted us to come back for the bar mitzvah, and there was like no way. The kids had friends, there was no way we were going to do this. And talking backwards and forwards, my father donated money for a classroom, and they actually gave him the Torah. And he brought it to Dallas. It's well traveled. And it went to Sheriff, and all my kids read out of it. And it's now at Anshe Torah, because we started with the beginning of Anshe Torah, and they gave us the Torah. It was only on loan to Sheriff. And it's now at Anshe, and my one grandson is 11 already. Kian. And so in 2015, on the 15th of May, he's going to be reading us. Please God, I'll be here.
That's fantastic.
And then I've got another grandson, his little brother, who's 8. So please God, that will remain here because, and that will be a heritage to the kids. But really nothing else was, other than family and friends, the other stuff was really immaterial.
Did other members of the family follow along after you?
Yes, my mother and father did come here. They came about 9 years after. It was not an easy transition. They were nearly 80.
Your parents were Charles and Herta Swag, right?
Yes.
Tell us about your parents and their life here in Dallas.
It was sad. And I can only say that it was sad because my father still had his business in South Africa. It was run by my cousin, George Bush, and he's a cousin of his. And my father was like a fish out of water. He really struggled here. He hated it here. He couldn't adjust to anything. We made him go for driving lessons. He drove, but oh my goodness, it was like a nightmare getting in the car with him. It was better that he didn't drive. He had to look after my mother. He hid a lot from us regarding my mother's health. She was not easy. And he became more of a shell of a man here. He wasn't that. He had a strong personality, and he really became a shell of a guy here because all he did was go to the supermarket, and he didn't adjust. He didn't even adjust to. We introduced him to a lot of the parents of kids that came here, but they just didn't find themselves here.
But was your mother involved in volunteer work here in the community?
Oh, she didn't want to even come to the JCC.
What about you?
She played bridge.
What about you? Are you involved in volunteer?
I was very, very involved in the synagogue, and I was sisterhood president at Anshe. I worked with my name, Pullman, with the Russian Jews that came. She and I ran that group. I did a lot of work at Monique and Justin went to Solomon Schechter. At that time it was called Solomon Schechter up north, and was very involved. I actually worked in the office with Ed Feinstein, voluntary, and so yeah, I've done my share. I've taken a little break from the voluntary, but I'm looking to get my teeth into something now again. Because I've been looking after my grandchild.
Is there anything in particular that you think you might like to jump into?
No, I'd just like somebody to ask me to do something, and
well, we could probably come up with something.
I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can. You're hired. Honey, come tomorrow.
Yeah. So what cultural traditions have you been able to maintain from South Africa? Were there any in particular that you recall that were important to your family and that you brought forward?
Not South African, no. Jewish, yeah. I mean, just the holidays like everybody else. I mean, no, not.
Were there any particular foods that were unique?
Oh yeah, we still eat a lot of the. I mean, it's not. Curry was a Malaysian dish. Love curry, and there's certain, like samosas is also. It's an Indian. We ate a lot of different kind of foods there in South Africa, but I don't say that there's anything in particular that.
Have you passed along the recipes to your children?
Well, my daughter-in-laws are not that big cooks. They all come to me on Friday nights, and I'm still hanging in there with everybody arriving at me. And my daughter's not married, so please God, when she does.
Does she cook with you at all?
She doesn't show much yet, but she's really she's busy at the moment. She's just published her second book, A Across the Great Divides, which is the story of my parents crossing the Pyrenees, but in her own, she's put her own fiction into it.
Really? Is it, and it's published?
Yes, it's published. And you can get it on Amazon, Across the Great Divides, and it's Monique.
Great or red?
No, Across the Great.
The Great Divides, okay.
And it's Monique Roy.
Thank you.
And she spoke at the JCC at the book fair for her first book. It's a children's book, Once Upon a Time in Venice. It's a lovely little book. It's also a Jewish theme, and she spoke. So she's been very busy. So she hasn't had time to cook. So none of them are cooking at the moment.
Oh,
I have Rosh Hashanah, I had breakfast, so.
When you were growing up, were your parents Zionists, or were you and your friends Zionists at all?
Yes.
Tell us about how important Israel was to you as a
child. Well, my mom's brother immigrated to Israel, and I hadn't met him, so my parents actually sent me at the age of 13 to visit him. And I stayed with a cousin of, a niece of my mom's brother, his wife. And if you had told me I had to go home to Cape Town, I wanted to stay in Israel. I mean, from the day I arrived there and stayed with this family who were dirt poor. I mean, I stayed in a room with three kids. There were four of us in a room, and we were able to walk up and down Dizengoff, and it was just, she had most wonderful friends and I was there for nearly 2 months, and it was just, I didn't want to go home. I really, really never wanted to go home. And I've been to Israel 8 times. I love Israel. I could have easily immigrated to Israel, not Michael. But I love Israel.
Have any other members of your family immigrated besides this cousin that you're talking about?
To Israel?
Yeah.
Oh, a lot of my mom's family immigrated to Israel. My father lost, 1977, but a lot of my mom's family are in Israel, and still today.
Are there any other things that you would find important to tell us as a legacy to your family about your experience either in South Africa or your experience since coming to Dallas?
Such as what?
Anything that we might have left out in questioning?
I don't think so. My years in Cape Town were really wonderful years, and my schooling, my years, and then my traveling. I traveled very early with my dad every year. They went to Europe, and I went from the age of 13. I used to go with them, and the first trip I did was to Israel, and they came to pick me up. But I was a very fortunate kid in South Africa. I was, came from a very fortunate home, and I was able to have most or whatever, anything I wanted. I was a spoiled little girl.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being with us this morning.
I've enjoyed being with you.
Your story is wonderful, and we really appreciate your time.
I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you.